if I were in charge here and could do anything I wanted, I would have just done with the house and built the
What?
apartments.
But what about
Yeah.
it is the perfect exemplar of the modest industrialist architecture of the whatever. I
Yeah,
don't even.
I think it's telling that you can't even finish the sentence without
Sure.
giggling.
Look around a city and you'll see a multitude of stories waiting to be told, but you might not realize just how complex and layered the explanation is. Join our motley cast of urban dwellers and planners as we research, question, and sometimes fall deep down a rabbit hole. I'm Ellen.
I'm Matt.
I'm Tess. And I'm Zach.
And this is Multi-Story.
Welcome back to Multi-Story. Today, we are looking at an interesting, let's say, situation that Tess captured on her travels. Here we see a very, well, I guess the building is very ordinary, but it's surrounded by, seems like, development of a slightly different era. So today we're going to talk about how we think this happened and what we think is going on.
Can I start also by saying I feel like this is exactly the vibe that Multi-Story was started with. It's like, Tess, you literally just saw this as like, what is going on here?
What I have to know, and I hope you all appreciate the level of restraint I've shown by not investigating this further until we've had a chance to baselessly speculate about it. So I've walked by this a few times. This is a building a few blocks north of the train station in the city of Lyon, France. And what is going on here? Like, I have to get to the bottom of it. But first, I want us to just pitch our ideas. How do we think this happened? Obviously, it should not have happened. Can we agree on that? Like, this is an abomination, right?
I think so. I even just noticed that like the newest building, it's not even like completely over the old building. It like stops halfway across the roof.
I know, like
Like
the roof keeps.
back and forth.
God, it is so weird. What do you think is going on?
My first reaction is like the story of Up, the Pixar movie Up. Like someone old just said, I refuse to yield and I am old and cantankerous. And if you come at me, then you are definitely the bad guys in this movie.
Okay, so I like that theory, and that's similar to what I was thinking. I thought about Batteries Not Included, famous movie from the 80s, right? Where a group of lovable robots helps a family to resist a developer and all the skyscrapers that are getting developed around them in Manhattan. I was like, okay, maybe this is just a holdout person who didn't want to sell, who liked the neighborhood the way it used to be. Things are changing. They don't want to change. They've been there all their whole life. They're gonna keep it how it is. If that's true, this building is built on top of and on the other side of this thing. So I feel like whoever built this like office building has some control of this property, right? So that makes me think that whatever
Yeah.
happened here, like they own that house, and I think maybe they wanted to tear it down, and the city's like, no, this is historic, right? That the city was able to say there is some significance to this, and we can legally prevent you from tearing it down. But for some reason, they weren't able to legally prevent them from building all sides of it because they own the property and there's no law that said they couldn't. So I think this is spite through loophole. That's my pitch.
So what I remember from planning school is that property rights are like a bundle of sticks. And I think somebody dropped most of the sticks here, but they kept that one stick that just like that it just left the cube. Like there's a stick that gives you the right to this little cube, and everything above that and everything below that to the sides, they lost those sticks, but they kept on to that one.
Oh, I think I share Tessa's theory that this is something with preservation, and that makes me actually question the original premise that this is an abomination. Because would it be better if they demolished the old building and built the modern building completely? I mean, I'd prefer. This is weird and ugly in its implementation, but I think the fact that they saved the old building and the old building could live on beyond the life of the new building is actually kind of cool, uh, aesthetic concerns aside. So if that's why they did it, I get it, and that's probably the best theory.
Zach, you have me thinking maybe the person who was in this house or whatever it was before they decided to sell, but they didn't sell all of their rights. They sold their air rights, and they have an easement for their existing structure within the property that they sold to the other unit or something. I don't know. I
So
wonder.
hang on, I have a question as a non-planner in the room. Like, is that actually something that could happen? Like, it would literally be like you can build up and above and around and through, but or sorry, but not through.
That's essentially what a condo is.
You can build a house on top of property you own, but you can sell the rights to mine beneath it, right? Like mineral rights. Like that's a very common kind of thing. Or you can own the property, but you can provide a utility, an easement to put an electric box or a windmill or something like that on your property. And you still own it, but they have an easement to access it or to do certain things on it. So there's a version of this where it could be an easement or a reverse easement where the office building owners own the property, but there is an easement that remains for this building to exist. Of course, all of this is through an American context. I don't really know like what
Okay.
municipal planning in Lyon is doing. I'm going to find out, but this portion is just for us to wildly speculate with no information.
So an additional clue is that that is a serious fence out front.
Makes it look sort of institutional.
Or
Yeah.
government.
Yeah.
Like,
Or it became so popular that they're like, people, you can't go to the Spite House. It's private property.
oh, like someone just lives there.
The other possibility is that this was all on purpose. Like it has a single owner and it was designed this way, either as a preservation thing, even if it wasn't required, or just because somebody's weird.
You're
It
you're
crossed my mind, Matt, when you said like it could be like that it aren't you glad it's preserved? Is like if it hadn't been preserved in this exact way, we would have been just walking by this White House every time.
I I just maybe I'm an optimist, but I don't believe another person would look at this and be like, "Yes, this is my vision."
Never know.
It if it's your vision, if it's the only way that the house stays, it becomes your vision. You become okay with it.
Do you think this house is important because somebody lived, like, is this where Charles de Gaulle grew up or something? And now it's a museum.
Look how oppressive it is that they don't even give the roof space, right? That
Hmm.
office building is levered over the pitch of that other roof and only stops at the gable. It is that office building is bullying that house.
And what we don't know is how
They
far
literally.
back the house goes and if it's like free in the back, because we've sworn off doing any additional research.
Right.
So I'd be curious to see like, oh, is that just actually not that impactful to the structure and it's like super long and has natural light behind it and like extends through the block or something? I'll be curious to know.
If we go to Google Maps and it's blurred out, my theories change dramatically. This is now part of like it's not Area 51, but it's whatever
Yeah, I mean,
whatever Europe's equivalent is.
I guess it's possible this looks like Versailles on the other side, but I don't think so. I think this is the front door.
But like the it does imply that the building built over it is only so narrow, right? Like they were so desperate to build something that is maybe what is that, like 20, 30 feet deep, like in order to not hit this house.
I don't know. It's weird. Okay, so the only way to answer this is to go investigate. This is what multi-story is all about. But final votes, and we'll revisit these after we learn some more. After discussing this, what's your pitch for how this happened?
I'm gonna go with the somebody for some weird reason did this intentionally. It's a single owner situation and they designed it this way for some reason. That's my theory.
Well, I think probably the historical preservation is the most likely, but I'm going to stick with my this person just sold their development rights above a certain level,
Okay.
the air rights.
I don't know if this is what I think, but it's certainly what I hope is that tomorrow morning a group of 1,000 helium balloons are going to come out the back of this house.
It's the Spite House then.
To despite yeah, it's the Spite House. It is someone said, or I guess maybe the historical is most what I think is the correct answer. Is this had some kind like there is a plaque on the wall somewhere, but it wasn't like important enough to make into a museum that the public could access. But someone somewhere decided that this needs to be saved, and no, we're not selling it, but you can build around it. Bonus points if there's a big juicy feud involved.
So I think my final answer is also spite, but the other direction. I think the office building owner wanted to tear it down and was legally prevented, but they were still allowed to do this. And so they maximized the
Mhm.
value of their property and they've maliciously complied with the zoning law to preserve this house in the most depressing and ridiculous way possible. That's my vote. But we'll find out. I'm going to go do some digging. We're going to come back with an answer. We'll see how we did. So we'll talk to you all soon. For everyone who's watching, we're going to find out in like 2 seconds. But for the rest of us, it's going to take a minute. So we'll be back soon.
I'm jealous of the people who get to know right away. See you next time,
That's it. We'll
everyone.
see you.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Tess. Report back.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. For all of the viewers, it's just been a matter of seconds, but for all of you, it's been weeks. And I'm sure you've been racking your brains about how that house could possibly be tucked under that office building the way it is. But in the few weeks that all of you have been away and wondering, I've gone down the rabbit hole and come back out. And now I know the history of Maison Valla. And let's dive in. And as I usually do, let's like go back in
Here we
time.
go. All right.
Yeah. So this is, yeah, exactly. This is a map of the area around Lyon. And what I've circled here, just to orient you, is like the original Roman city up on the hill. This is the old medieval city tucked between the river and the hillside. This is the bulk of the historic city, what's called the Presqu'île, sort of a peninsula between the Rhone and Saône rivers. Um, and the house that we're looking at is over here. And the context for this is that for the long history of the city of Lyon, this area was not really developed or developable. You can see there's lots of low-lying areas that flood frequently. And even the name of this neighborhood, Brateau, comes from a pre-French word, a Franco-Provençal word that means like the little islands in between like moving streams of water, right? So imagine this is an area that for a long time was just sort of a swampy mess. And in here you can see maybe if you look just to the right of the circle, there's a fort, and just below the circle, there's sort of a rectangle of buildings. It's a barracks. And when this map was made, just recently was constructed the railroad from Lyon to Geneva. And that rail line runs right between the fort and the river there. So this is the location of the house. Um, and that railroad that was built, one of the early connections to the city of Lyon, this was the terminus station for the route that went to Geneva. It was finished in 1858. And what's interesting is because it was sort of tucked between the fort and the barracks, they required it to be made of wood so that it could be taken apart in case there was like a military reason that they needed it to like protect access to the area. So it was always sort of meant as a temporary transitional kind of thing in this rapidly growing, rapidly industrializing area.
I
And
like,
here we,
hang on, in that previous picture, is that like a line of horse taxis waiting to pick everybody up from the train station?
yeah, it's horse Uber, you know. I don't think much has changed about how the front of train stations work from when they started till now. I think it's pretty similar.
And Tess, if forgive me if we're
Uh,
gonna get there, but looking at that map from I went to Lyon for the Olympics last summer. Is the
Humble
present day
brag.
train station similarly located? It
it's
feels like
nearby.
okay, feels like about the same spot.
Yes, it's quite close to this spot exactly. And the present day train station would be sort of directly to the right of this barracks that you can see on the to the bottom of the circle there. This is a map from 1872, and what had happened is over the mid 1800s, improvements in infrastructure, they began building dikes that prevented flooding and it dried out a lot of this land. And essentially, land that couldn't be developed was now ready to be developed and in demand to be developed because the city was growing and industrializing, all of that kind of thing. And you can see further to the left on this map, everything's sort of more compact and built up. And further to the right in the area around the circle, it's sort of filling in during this period. And within this particular circle, you can see a building at that intersection, which is a mineral grease factory. And the subject of our story, a Monsieur Roland Valla, was the son-in-law of the factory's founder and inherited it. And the location of that factory was right where that circle is shown. And one of the things that's interesting is, in all of the materials I could find about Roland Valla, he's always described as a modest industrialist. So he owns a factory. He is an industrialist with whatever connotations that comes with, but he is a modest industrialist. So
Is that
that's
like
because
the 1800s version of like a modest billionaire? Like, can you be a modest industrialist?
I feel like it's going to be up to you to judge here the level of modesty, but it does become relevant in terms of how the house is still there today. Okay, so the house is constructed by Roland Valla in 1888, right where I've shown this circle, and it's built with its back pretty much right up against that rail line. And you can see that the picture of the train station I showed you is just a couple blocks to the north. You can see that on the map. You can see that the fort is still there across the railroad tracks. And essentially, our modest industrialist has built his home across the street from his grease factory, all the more convenient to keep track of what's going on and that sort of thing. So this map was made the year that that house was built. And a little sneak preview, the house is registered as an historic structure, something that happened in the saga of what is built around it. And because of that, the official websites have descriptions and pictures of the interior. So this is our modest industrialist house interior here. Some of the parts that are left, the molding, the chandelier, the fireplace, um, the mirror, fancy staircase. And according to the family members who provided information about this, a lot of these artistic decorations, including these bathroom stained glass windows of different Roman scenes, were like designed and installed by Roland Valla himself in the house. So a lot of personal and care and attention from our modest industrialist into his new home.
Is either a DIY enthusiast or super stingy. I'm doing this myself.
Yeah, or maybe he's just very particular. Maybe no one gives him like the right depiction of Juno for his toilet, and he wants it to be just so. You know what I mean?
No, I
Who
mean,
among
no, I
us?
don't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Anyway, these are the things that modest industrialists worry about. Okay, so by
sorry,
1890,
Tess, I have one more actual question. With your circle here, when you take the photo of the house that you have, is the fort like behind you or where how
right, from the original photo that you saw, the fort would have been essentially in the backyard of that house. It would have been
so
that
like
house.
behind?
Yeah, it would have been that house, a very busy rail line in the backyard, and then a fort with a moat directly behind that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Um, this is a map from 1890. By this time, the house would have been completed. However, the Roland Valla died in 1889, the year that the house was finished. And so his son Victor succeeded him, took the house, took over control of the factory. And so for all of his attention to detail with the bathroom windows, he didn't really live to enjoy it. Maybe there are some perils with living across the street from a mineral grease factory. I'm not sure.
Or
Um,
perils of being type A.
Yeah, maybe it was the stress of choosing the crown molding. Who can say?
Yep.
Okay, so important detail here. I mentioned that that train station was temporary, and during this time, as the city's expanding and developing, there is also a decommissioning of those military fortifications. They're obsolete, they're not really serving the purpose they were built for, and they're taking up a lot of ground. And there's a long process to sort of decommission those forts. And so that fort that's behind this house is one of those decommissioned fortifications, and the ground is sort of leveled. And in the process, they decide to move the railroad track. So they take the ground where the fort was and they like scoot the rail over, and they decide also to move the train station a few blocks to the east. They're able to create some separation with the track, so other traffic can move east and west through the area, and it solves some other problems there. But beginning in 1907, the original train station, this is a picture of it getting dismantled in preparation for the new one opening a few blocks to the east. And this is the new station that is built nearby, and this becomes a major passenger rail station for the city of Lyon, and continues to be so until 1983, where the high-speed TGV trains come through and the platforms aren't big enough. And that's when they build Lyon Part 2, the train station that's there now, and the whole redevelopment that was that barrack site becomes the big Part 2 shopping center and mall and office complex around there that comes back later in our story.
An entirely
But this,
charmless train station. Hard to.
yeah, it definitely feels like a product of the 80s. They are doing there's newer parts that I think are nicer, but yeah, it's sort of a crowded underground mall kind of deal at the moment. Um,
So is this gone now?
This one is still there, and it's been a few different things, but you can still go visit this one. It just no longer, and when you come in on a passenger train on this route, you go past the platforms, you see the station. The canopy's been torn down, but the station building's still there and houses a variety of different things today. So moving forward a few years, you can see the circle is where that house is located, but now you can see that the rail line has been scooted a few blocks to the east. You see that there's a new train station up there a few blocks to the east, and you see all of these rail spurs that are more or less where the old rail line used to go. So the is no longer has a railroad in its backyard, but you see these lines of streets with no development around them. There's just sort of the sketch or outline of a street grid. Basically, this is all the land of the former fort that's now able to be developed. And much of what was there before was the fort, which is gone, or the old train station, which is gone, or the rail line, which is gone. The only thing that's left is our modest industrialist home. And that is, we can zoom in here and we can see that the year here is incorrect. So this is an aerial photo from 1947. So over the next few decades, that area develops and it develops along that new street grid. But our Maison Valla, our little house, is sort of the odd man out. It was there before the streets were laid out. It was there before any of these other buildings. It was built around infrastructure and other things that aren't there anymore. This is also 1947, so ignore the year on the right. But you can see even as this originally developed in the early 1900s, it was already sort of an odd duck. It didn't line up with the roads. It was sort of off skew from the other buildings. And you can sort of see where the parcel lines would be and some of these outbuildings, where the old rail line would be. You can see these rear buildings that run behind the house that's circled here that sort of follow the route where the rail line would have been. But one of the things I learned from this process is that it wasn't just recently that this house sort of became weirdly tucked away. It only had a few decades where it wasn't weird.
Because I was going to say it's already surrounded strangely by 1947.
Right. And even by the as soon as those areas develop, as the city's growing in the 1920s and 30s, they're developing along the new street grid. And this house was just tucked in there because it was built before that stuff was there. Another thing to mention,
And
in the 1920s, the grease factory burned down and was moved to a different part of the city. So that is also rebuilt as apartments. So across the street to the west, no signs of the grease factory that used to be the family
probably
legacy.
probably good that they moved the wooden
Gre-
fort or the wooden train station far
Yeah, I
away
mean the
before
wooden
then.
building covered in grease. That's a
Yeah.
really great structure.
And Tess, you might get to this, but do you have a sense of why this house at that point in time wasn't taken down or like asked to
Well,
be bought and moved?
it remained in the ownership of the Valla family, and it was passed from Roland Valla to his son and to his son, and there was an attachment to the place and to the house and to the business as well. You know, a legacy of making mineral grease to be proud of. And I did find a picture of this is further south in another part of Lyon, an area that remained more industrial, but this is where the factory moved after the original one burned in 1920. So if you're wondering what a modest industrialist, modest mineral grease factory looks like, here you go.
I
Uh,
was, thank you.
I was too. I find it kind of fascinating. And Ellen, I know you always appreciate when we jot down ideas for future episodes. I'm
I do.
noticing in these pictures and others I looked at all of these sort of industrial gardens around these factories. And it has me wondering,
Oh.
like, was it just so noxious and polluted that you could not live next to this? Like, it just smelled too bad, or you couldn't breathe at all. And so the best they could do was like, grow some small garden plots around it? Or was this like a World War II thing where they
Mm.
needed more, there were food shortages and they wanted to grow stuff locally? I'm very curious about this historic industrial garden dynamic that's going on here.
It
So
is interesting, especially because in the US, I feel like I wonder if more it's like which came first kind of episode, like if industrial has been here for a long time, so we're going to put gardens versus hey, here's a poor part of town, we're going to put some industry there, and who has to live near what or who can afford to get out. Hmm.
yeah, I don't have answers to these. It's a total tangent, but I wanted to share the grease factory. So this is a picture that's from a few years before the existing development project, and you can see the nature of this house tucked between these buildings. So this is largely what it would have looked like between the 19 teens up until 2000, basically. It's just this weird little house tucked in between much longer buildings.
I feel like tucked is generous. This thing is squished.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's be honest. It's sort of, I don't know. My sense is that the French do have a different sense of personal space. In the US, my bubble is much bigger than it is in France, and maybe it goes for buildings too, right?
Yeah.
They don't mind getting a little cozy. I do just want to show, here's a picture before the most recent development in aerial where you can see the house tucked in,
Oh,
how it was
barely.
before this
Yeah.
project happened. Um, and here's a view of how it looked after the development. So if you can't tell where it is, it's beneath that office building. And here's another view where you can see it sort of squirts out the back.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So it is an abomination, but it's not a totally depressing abomination. It has windows and daylight, and its roof sees the sky, at least a part of it. It does remain very strange. Okay, so what happened in the 1950s? The family sells their grease factory to a larger industrial conglomerate, but they continue to own the house through the 1990s. In the late 1990s, the descendants of Roland Valla decide to sell the home. And I don't know the reason exactly, but we can maybe make some inferences based on what happens next. So they sell the home to a developer. There's the Capri Development Company who buys the house in 2001. They decide that they are going to raise the entire site. They just want to clean slate, build from scratch. And if you remember, we're just a block or so from all of those big office towers and shopping center. The Lyon Part 2, the new train station is just to the south. So it's a high demand area. There's lots of development happening, and that demand is sort of spilling over into this block. And so this developer has bought this house along with the other property. Their plan is to tear it all down and rebuild like a high density residential project in this location. However, once the grandson of Roland Valla learns that the developer plans to demolish the house, he begins to campaign to save the house. So the family has sold the property, but he begins a campaign to save the house. And he makes a pitch to the city of Lyon and the region, the folks who manage historic preservation to get the house registered on what is basically the French historic building register so that it can be protected.
And so it
And
hadn't been registered before that? It
it
had been built
hadn't,
all
no.
around 17 different ways, but no one had said to actually protect it. They were just
Right. Well,
protecting it.
it had been under the ownership of the family who cared for it and took care of it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But now, even though they decided to sell, after selling, decided that it was too much to bear to see the house lost, and so fought to save it. So I think we can imagine a few different perspectives here, like the original owners, the family who have this long legacy of this house they adore that represents their family and their family's history. And this is speculating that, if they had to sell it for financial reasons or something like that, maybe it was um, maybe they were sorry to see it go, right? And then after selling, learning the news that it would be demolished, you can understand why they might want to preserve it. It might have a lot of meaning to them. I think you can also see the perspective of the developer who buys a house from a family, and immediately after finishing the purchase, the family initiates a government action to prevent them from using it for what they bought it for, right? So these
I
are sort
could
of
also see a world where there was no mention of destroying it in the sale, and then suddenly it's on the chopping block.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to create. It's fun to
Villains.
imagine how this could go. Yeah, I mean, if you read the French press about it, the developer is an unequivocal, like, dastardly villain, right? Like,
Violent.
I think that's just the default stance in general. So the the state ends up being receptive to the application to preserve this house. And there's a few things that add historic value that they say give it a reason to be preserved. One is its proximity to the historic train station. So the Brato train station a few blocks away, the newer one that I showed you, the one that's still there, that is his historic building, and the district around it had some protections, and this house was built at the same time. And so its proximity to that and historical relationship to that was a point that they argued in their favor. The other part that they argued in their favor is that while elsewhere in Lyon there are some large and extravagant industrialist mansions, that there are no longer homes for the modest industrialists to be preserved.
No diversity among the rich people.
And so they end up adding it to a historic protection based on its relationship to the train station, and also because it's an example of a modest industrialist home rather than a grand industrialist palace.
A brand new
And so there's,
taxonomy by which to categorize architecture.
yeah, exactly.
People, we're just like you. Some of us are middle.
Very mid.
Okay, so it gets added to the register. The developer can't tear it down, but what happens next? They're trying to figure out how to salvage this their developer pro forma from this basically, and they look at initially their project was going to be a residential project, and they ended up changing it to office because they can get a little bit more dollar per square foot, having lost a bunch of like frontage and space and volume here. Initially, the developer pitches to the city that he can build like a building bridge over the top of the house, as you see, and they like say, no, you're crazy, go try again. He tries to make it into like a fancy restaurant terrace, but he can't find anyone to who wants to open a restaurant in this weird little hole.
I mean,
And
if it were a fancier industrialist house that you could build over, maybe, but
right,
just a
yeah,
mid. It's just a
yeah,
mid.
Modest fine dining.
only a modest
Yeah.
restaurant, exactly. He ends up insisting on this idea of building over the top of the house. And although I don't know for certain, my sense is that the way that this went down and the nature of what the historic preservation regulations permit, my sense is that they could make him preserve the house, but they couldn't make him not build over the top. And he was sort of just attached to this idea. And more so, he negotiated a density bonus to like add additional square footage, additional floors for the loss he received from the space he wasn't able to develop underneath. So the developer got to build a little bit bigger and taller in exchange for saving this little house. And it was built as part of this office complex. There's like a weird passage that enters like the second floor. It was rented to like, I guess like a marketing agency and some other things. Those pictures I took are still there, and like some office common spaces. It's essentially just an part of, it's like an annex to this office building.
The house itself has there's a passageway into the house, you mean?
Yes. So because the floors don't exactly line up, like the new office
Mm-hmm.
floor templates are going to be different heights and in different spaces in this old house. So they have to like connect it somehow. So it's easiest to do on the second floor, where they sort of cut a hole in a side and it connects to an elevator, and that's how you get to this weird thing. Um, they took off like the porch and stairs and some other elements. As you can see, it's like oppressively close to the roof. I still maintain it's like this should never happen. I feel like this is a case where the city should absolutely have said, this is ridiculous, try again.
But then what's the better option? I was going to ask, like, is this like a low key success story? Or would have it been better if they just demolished the house, considering the context had already been destroyed?
I think there's probably better ways to acknowledge the potential loss of revenue that the developer would have from not developing this house. I would argue it'd probably be better to put those office floors next door, even if, even if it didn't line up with the height of the rest of the blocks, rather than burying this in a cave. Or you could have had some more massing in the interior courtyard, or you could have compensated the developer for the loss in some way. You could have, you know, deemed it of public value. And I don't know the French legal equivalent, but in the US, if there's a regulatory taking, as this might be considered with where it was in the process, then you could compensate them for that without putting the house in permanent timeout here in the dark.
Yeah, the minimal clearance feels like a bit of an FU. Like a fine. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna build exactly as close as I can versus feeling like it maybe has a little room to breathe and respecting the previous house a little bit more.
Um,
So test the supposition that this was a historic preservation thing was correct, but also we discussed in our suppositions,
Pre-read.
yeah, that there was some element of spite in this, in the way that it was designed. Did you determine? It seems sort of obvious, I guess, in looking at it, but like, did you find evidence of that?
I not explicitly no, right? The family's glad the house is preserved. The neighborhood finds it quirky. The developer eventually got what they wanted and built a big office building over the top of it. I think the only the only loser is the house, right?
Right.
Um, I just have to believe there was better ways to do this, and this does feel like, if you read between the lines, this was a little bit of, I'm going to build this and you can't stop me. That's still my sense, but that's not explicit anyway. There's no news articles from 30 years ago about arguments in a city planning office, right? But I don't know.
I feel like most arguments that make it to a city planning office are going to end up with a compromise that are the worst of both worlds.
Zach, do you think that's what we're
Yeah,
looking at? The worst of both worlds?
I think so. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm thinking of Highway 71 in Kansas City.
Yeah.
This is kind of like that type of compromise
Like
where
where it
they
goes.
wanted to bulldoze a neighborhood to build a highway, and the neighborhood fought back, but they still built a highway, but they just put at-grade crossings, which are now incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And so you got the harms to the neighborhood, and you have an unsafe highway. To a lesser
um,
extreme, because there's not the safety issue here, but I feel like it's a similar compromise where it is the house ended up in a worse situation. Then honestly, I probably just would, if I were in charge here and could do anything I wanted, I would have just done with the house and built the
What?
apartments.
But what about
Yeah.
it is the perfect exemplar of the modest industrialist architecture of the whatever. I
yeah.
don't even, I
I
don't even
mean,
know how you make
yeah,
that
you
argument.
can't. I think it's telling that you can't even finish the sentence
Yeah.
without giggling, right? Like, I do think the historic value is tenuous. There's a very strong sentimental value to the family. I don't know. I don't know if I'm with Zach that I would tear it down. I do agree that it's kind of a worst of all possible outcomes situation. But if we go back to all of our predictions, I did say it was a historic preservation issue. It was. Matt, you said it was kind of on purpose. And the developer did get it in their head that they wanted a bridge and pushed it even after the city said no. And like just got really attached to that and just like imagined in their mind, this is the perfect place for a restaurant terrace, right? So I do think there was a sense of, I don't think the developer feels it is the abomination that we do. And so that might be an argument against the spite factor. To Zach's argument that it's relating to this bundle of property rights, it kind of is in the sense that we still own the property, but they lost some rights to manage the existing structure because it was deemed historic, right? So some of those sticks in the bundle were taken away, and that did affect what happened here. And so, yeah, I think a lot of what we had talked about is reflected here a little bit, and that's the story of Maison Valla.
What do you think is going to,
Wow.
what this site will look like in 100 years? Do you think that the historic structure, historic by the modern standard, would be preserved and the office will convert, or eventually like no one will care anymore?
I think that the way this was built will add to its historic value. I think it will be so strange
I
that
mean,
it
there's
is
a
more
podcast about it now.
likely to
True.
persist. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, but there's also lots of like every couple years I found another like press story like what's the deal with this house, and interviews with the people and questions about how I got that way. Like it has drawn an attention that it never would have if this hadn't happened. And so
Right.
in that sort of perverse way, smushing it under this office has brought Maison Valla in front of far more people than would have ever seen it or thought of it or talked about it. So
So
yeah, so
that's just sorry, just to clarify, but it's like you couldn't find much about it when it was happening beyond just like kind of the back and forth of building the terrace. But then afterwards, people are like, what the heck?
Yeah,
yeah,
it's had, I guess, 30
yeah.
years of people walking by with the same curiosity that you had, Tess. Like, what in the hell? Because it's like very clearly strange.
Yeah.
So is that elevating the historic relevance of the site for others? It's more visible, it's more interesting, it's more unique. Like maybe the developer
Certainly
did
to
us
urban
all a favor.
planners.
Yeah.
It's creating a precedent that we preserve mistakes. If, if we regard this as a mistake, like this is uniquely ugly and weird, let's make sure we preserve it. This,
Let's never do it again. What'd you say, Zach?
Remember in Play SimCity 2000, the
Yes.
Arcopolises,
Yeah.
the large superstructures that are like an entire city unto themselves?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to want to develop one of those here except for this whole block is going to be designated a historical area. So there's going to be a cutout in the like Arcopolis thing
Oh, it's just, yeah,
that has this whole office building and then the cutout of the little house. So it's going to be like nesting dolls.
I was gonna say urban nesting dolls. So we get the
yeah.
house, and then we get the office building, and then you get the gigantic metropolis above it.
That's my prediction for 100 years
So
from
when
now.
we get
Yeah.
flying cars, there will not be a landing pad here, but it'll be a tourist destination.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. You're right, Zach. This is going to become a inception block where each block makes a mockery of what came before, and when it's done, it will be the most unique place in the city. Except maybe, I will say, as I was looking at this, a little epilogue here.
Aw.
There are some other houses nearby in Lyon that I do wonder about. So I have some questions about the industrial gardens. I also found some little houses like this where I really want to know how they happened, why they happened.
There's a lot of these. Actually, when I was in Champagne, there I did take a photo. I took a few photos of things where it's like, what is going on here? To see if there's an
How it
interesting
starts.
story behind them. That's how
Yeah.
it starts. That was exactly what happened. My friend was like, I wonder what's going on there. I was like, well, I have a podcast about that.
That's what you get for noticing things.
That's
Yeah.
right. Well, nice job, Tess.
Yeah, Tess, thanks for taking us on that journey. I I assumed the outcome was correct, but also it was more nuanced and textured than I thought. So that's pretty interesting.
There's a bit of everybody was right.
Yeah, everybody gets like a half point.
Ooh, are we keeping score?
Yes. I get 500 points.
Hey,
I think a lot of times the answer to the original question is maybe less interesting than what you learn about the place along the way. That's happened in a few of our other episodes. I feel like that was the case here. Like this house was built in a turbulent time when lots of things were changing, big things were changing. The world was changing, railroads were coming, city was industrializing, forts torn down, floodplains filled, and you know, I say all the time, just what are the little accidents of circumstance and history that lead a place to be the way it is today? And once we unpack all of that, we see all of these different systems and processes and people and ideas that converge to fit out a place exactly the way that it is. And that's the part that's interesting to me.